going on, everybody? You are live with Osiris. Welcome to the Author's Lounge. The world is filled with storytellers, and I, along with my guests, are here today in the Author's Lounge to help educate and inspire the young generation of writers and creators. Now, my guests are professionals in publishing, writers from a wide range of formats, and successful entertainers. They will provide beneficial advice on what to do and what not to do on your path to success. So, without further ado, I'll present to you our next guest. Let's go. Our guest is a writer based in Brooklyn, New York. Their debut novel, The Atmospherians, was named a New York Times Editor's Choice. Their second novel, People Collide, was New York Times Critics' Pick. Other writings have appeared in the New York Times Magazine, The Guardian, The Cut, Esquire, Vulture, GQ, Vogue, The Atlantic, Tin House, and elsewhere. Additionally, actress Abby Jacobson has adapted their novel People's Collide with UCP and Killer Films. Sorry, I'm excited. But nonetheless, without further ado, I present to you all McElroy. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you as well. I got tongue tied.
Yeah,
Sometimes I get excited.
yeah,
But yeah, as I was mentioning, we met in San Francisco during the San Francisco Writer Conference. I do want to say thank you so much for showing my father so much hospitality during that time on the rooftop. It was You never know who you're going to run into, and you never know what anybody's story is. And so it was just a wonderful experience meeting both you and Amy up there.
yeah. No, it was a great time. It was a weird restaurant. Not sure I want to go back to that rotating restaurant. I got a little seasick. I feel
Oh,
like being up there
yeah,
moving
yeah.
around. But
It was a little weird. I would
yeah.
admit I wasn't expecting because when I went up there, I wasn't aware that it even rotated.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was ready for that. It was. I don't think I was prepared for how it would make me feel. Yeah,
Oh yeah. Well,
yeah.
speaking of feel, you made a lot of people feel really good during your time at the conference. I understand as well. So when you did your guest speaking, I hadn't flown in yet to San Francisco, so I wasn't able to catch your presentation that you provided to the conference. But overall, how did that whole deal even come about?
Yeah, so I was asked to give one of the keynote speeches by Lissa, the director of the program,
Mhm.
and then it was a great opportunity. They reached out to my agent, and I agreed to do it, and it seemed like a great deal. So I had an essay of mine that is about empathy and body swaps, which is something that happens in my second book, and I
Mhm.
was able to. Revise that essay a little bit to make it appropriate to be a speech, and so that's what I delivered to the conference. So it was it was really fun to be able to go out there and do that. I feel like how it came about was just um, and a nice opportunity that Lissa reached out.
And it's interesting in that regards too, because you're based in New York and this conference was in California. And so the networking, the circle that you have, the connection that you have is so important. So for those who are new into this business, like networking is essential. And so I would like to ask you, just in your experience, how well has networking played not only into your success as a writer, but just success as a whole?
Yeah, networking, it's interesting. I don't necessarily think of myself as networking very often. I think I just like, being friends with people. And I think that's like, I think even to, like, you would thank me for like showing your dad some hospitality, but to me, it's like just be curious about people, talk to people, right? And I think with that sort of mind, to sort of go around a conference and be curious about people, talk to people. That type of networking is what I'm most interested in, right? Like I could say that like, oh, I was like networking with your dad, but like I wasn't. I was just like talking to him, right? And like,
Mhm.
talking to a guy about the Boston Celtics and the Toronto Raptors. And so
Yeah.
like that and that to me, like what ends up working really well is like having a conversation like that, and then sometimes you end up having a conversation like that and it's a writer who you really admire, or it's like
Mhm.
person you end up being able to like meet down the line who might be like an agent or a publisher. And to me, it's all about just being able to engage with people interpersonally more than it is about
Yeah.
this act of needing to like network or tell them who I
Yep.
am, ask who they are. It's just finding a connection with other people. And I find that just doing that has really been the way that, or has been what has like kind of led me into making those connections with other people.
Yeah, I love that. There's authenticity in that approach. It doesn't give any sort of credence that, not you, but just in general, generally speaking, that the person is seeking out anything.
Right.
You're just talking, having a genuine conversation and just making a connection. That's what happened with us.
Yeah.
We went up there and I just kind of, one, I was confused where I was at. I'm like, I didn't even realize this
Yeah.
floor was a
Yeah.
thing
You're
until
like,
my father.
where's the wall? Why does it keep, where'd the restaurant go? It's moving.
No, right.
Yeah.
Right. And you were the first person who I saw sitting right there, and I introduced myself, and then you and Amy were kind enough to say, "Hey, just come take a seat." And so let me go get my dad. Brought him over, who was sitting on the opposite side. And I said, "Hey, I just met these really nice people.
Yeah.
I think you should come over." And we all just sat down, spoke, I think for like 20 minutes, and then we ran into each other throughout the time there.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
so
how it happens. Yeah, you just
yeah,
talk to people.
for sure. So now, my follow up question to that, in addition to the whole networking and making friends or just talking to people, being in New York, right? I'm not there.
Mhm.
I've only known California and how the market goes in California. But I know we were talking before we aired, before we start recording, and you had mentioned about the hub there for the economy or the ecosystem for publishing. Would you mind elaborating a bit more on what it's like as a publisher or as a writer or an author in the state of New York? What is that
Yeah,
truly
I
like?
mean, in New York, I know mostly what it's like to live in New York City, and to me, there are so many readings happening all the time. There are like at
Hmm.
least every weekday there is a going to be at least 5 to 6 readings at bookstores across the city, and so that means that every night you can go out and meet other authors, talk to other authors. There are a lot of like magazine parties that happen. Like when a magazine has a new issue, oftentimes they'll throw a
Hmm.
party, which is kind of a way for the magazine to raise funds.
Hmm.
Like they charge like a ticket price, and then you go in, you buy drinks, all of that, so the magazine can recuperate some money in order to pay their contributors and pay for their costs. But those events often end up being ways to talk to other writers,
Okay.
to meet other writers, to oftentimes you'll run into people. And I think this is actually the closest thing to like what feels like traditional networking is like going to a party and like say there's a writer whose work I've read online or something and really admire and I can like have never met them. I can just go over and be like, hey, I really love your work, right? And then
Hmm.
hopefully strike up a conversation, something like that. But I think in New York, there's both like the publishing hub of like the businesses, the big five publishers that have their offices there, but there's
Hmm.
also the day to day of like going to parties when a book comes out, talking to friends, going to their readings, supporting them. And that is
Hmm.
the sort of like on the ground kind of connections that happens every day. And that's what New York feels really, that feels really fruitful and important to like just be around
Mm.
that, to be around other writers and to feel like there's always an opportunity to be inspired.
That is such an inspiration to hear. So I have a buddy who lives out in New York, and I've only been in New York for an estimated 1 week, several, and by several I mean like almost 2 decades ago.
Yeah.
But I've always wanted to actually go back and explore the area. I remember the Alicia Keys song,
Yeah.
Empire State of Mind,
Yeah.
when she said, this concrete jungle. If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. It does seem true. Most people who I've met who are from New York can make it anywhere in this country.
Yeah.
But if you are from other areas, it's a little more difficult to blend in and make your way through the weeds of New York. For you, you had mentioned about the Big Five.
Yeah.
So I didn't actually mention this when I in the introduction, but I.O. McElroy is traditionally signed. There are certain cases where I have on the show authors who are self-published or they're independently published through an indie house. But Isle is indeed traditionally published with Harper. Is it Harper Collins or Harper? Just Harper?
So
That goes
it's
through
Harper Via, which is underneath, which is part of HarperCollins.
Okay, now, please, if you don't mind, explain a little bit how you were able to get that whole deal going on.
Yeah, I mean, I signed with an agent in 2017, and then we worked on my first book, and my first book was actually sold to Atria, which
Hmm.
is a published by Simon and Schuster. And
Yeah.
then my editor at Atria actually moved to Harper, and then so for my second book, I also followed and moved to Harper as well. So how that normally works is my agent I send my book to my agent, and then my agent sends it to the publisher, and then they decide whether they're going to publish it or how much money to offer for it. um,
Hmm.
and like that, I think is that's yeah, it's nerve wracking when my agent has the book and my agent is doing her job, but I trust her a lot, and she's really really good at her job, so I feel lucky to be working with someone who understands my work and understands
Yeah.
and sort of supports my vision, and then also knows how to like put it in the right hands of people who want to publish my work.
No, for sure. And I can't imagine like the amount of nerves that comes in with the, this is my baby right here.
Mhm.
I crafted this into something that I'm hoping translates well to whoever the audience is. And so with your agent, was it a case of just having to query your agent, or was it a circumstance where you just happened to meet the person and just they were an agent and things lined up? How did that happen for you?
We met at a literary conference,
Oh, nice.
and actually pretty similarly just sat down next to her at a table and just started talking to her, um,
Yeah.
and then just eventually she was like, "Oh, I'm an agent." I'm like, "Oh yeah," I knew who she was. Like
Yeah.
like she like, but I didn't lead with like, "Hey, you're an agent." I was just like talking like.
Hmm.
And we ended up talking. She was like, "Tell me about your work," and we talked. And then I sent her some of my work, and she loved it. And then I signed with her. So it was very. I feel it was extremely like meet cute of how we like met each other, and I feel very fortunate that I didn't have to do the query route, which I know is really difficult, and I lucked out. But I also think that actually, I'm not sure if the San Francisco Writers Conference had agent meetings for writers.
They
Um,
did.
they
Yes,
did.
they did.
Okay. Yeah, but
Hmm.
those sorts of things are really important, and I know that like before I signed with my agent, that I was being at conferences, I think, is a really excellent way to meet agents, and having that personal connection with someone can be really important for actually when you eventually do query and when you eventually do email the agent. Just being able to say, "Hey, we met at this conference," I think can really help you stand out.
For sure. No, that's for sure. So, speaking of standing out, with you and your and just in your platforms with social media, how has social media's platforms helped leverage your career in an uptick in comparison to maybe how, I don't know, you've been in the game for a long time, at least well over a decade, and so you've seen what social media has done now in comparison to, let's say, like 15 years ago where it wasn't a big thing. Like, how much different is the business now?
Yeah, it seems like I social media to me just seems like a way to connect to a lot of other people, to share my work, to if I'm like teaching a class, it's a way to reach out and like raise the profile of that class. It's also like I feel like I think of it less as a way to like share or like send news of my workout, then I do think of it as like a
Mhm.
way to connect to a lot of other authors,
Yeah.
and that I think is really excellent. And a lot of friendships like
Hmm.
have evolved out of connections that I have with people online. Just again,
Yes.
like admiring someone's work, DMing them, and then eventually meeting them in person for a coffee or a drink or dinner or whatever. And that those types of friendships have been really important for me. Just like,
Yes.
and they're founded, I think, on like the social media space,
Yep.
and that has been good. And I think again, it is. When I am teaching a class, it is a really great way to be able to reach out to people.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. That was one of the things that I saw too in my research about you was your teaching skills and what you teach. Please just break down, if you don't mind, what you teach and what's the goal for what you're teaching.
Yeah, so in about a month, I'm going to be starting. I've taught this class two times. It is a year-long novel generator,
Mhm.
and that class we meet every 2 weeks. It's normally between about 6 and 12 students, and we meet, and everyone in the class attempts to write their first novel over the course of a year. And we read a bunch of first novels, and then we workshop everyone's novels. And every week, people are submitting like very rough pages that they've been working on through the week,
Mhm.
and we just have a lot of conversations one on one between me and each individual author, and then conversations in workshop where someone will submit their pages to the rest of the group, and then we talk about them as a class. And that class has been really excellent, and it's been a lot of the people who've taken it have. Um, Gotten books out of it and have gotten to the place where I think it's really difficult to go from like first draft straight to like publishing a book, but I think a lot of people have gotten to the place where they have a first draft at the end of our class that is like
Yeah.
really solid and ready to start revising and ready to like
Hmm.
begin to start bringing to agents and start querying. So my goal with that class is to really just, I think one of my like big feelings about writing a novel is it's a pretty lonely endeavor, but it is really great when you're able to do it alongside some other people. And it's less
Yeah.
about getting other people to read your work than it is more about sitting in the class and being like, wow, it's hard to do this. It's hard to stay invested. It's
Mhm.
hard to, and knowing that other people are there with you doing that, I think provides a lot of inspiration and support.
Yeah. No, no, for sure. Just even in listening to what you're saying is such a good thing to be able to teach somebody, to be able to help them. And that actually coincides with literally the purpose of this. Like, there's tons, if not thousands, of podcasts out there. But to me, it comes about what's the message
Right.
in what the person is trying to do to be able to then bring people on board. And your idea in which you and your team are doing, of being able to teach writers, writing a novel is hard.
Yeah.
It is hard, and I've tried, and I don't say that like I tried and quit. I write with the idea of let's see where the story takes me.
Yeah.
But just even writing a novella is tricky. So being able to be a teacher, one, for teaching people how to write a novel already speaks to the skill set that you have
Right.
as a writer yourself, but then you also having a novel. And so I want to speak about a couple of things that's coming to mind as I was listening to you. But one of your books, right, the traditional published route or trap publishing route, right?
Yeah.
I've been told, of course, I don't know this from experience, but I've been told it can take anywhere from writing the manuscript to it hitting its publication could take anywhere from 1 to 2 years. Is there a lot of truth to that in your experience?
Oh yeah, that seems like a pretty short timeline. um,
Oh,
yeah. It can take a while. So um, from the moment that I sell a book, which and that doesn't really include all of the time that I went into writing it and making sure that it was as good as possible. From the
hmm,
moment that I sell it to its actual publication, normally that timeline is about a year and a half. Um,
okay.
yeah. So
Oh,
that is probably maybe what you've heard, but there's so much work that goes into even selling a book. Um,
yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
So what happens, like at least for you, in between the publication piece, like you sold your book, I hear they do it, advanced pays. But as a writer, how do you make your living, like in between publications?
Yeah, I mean, there's the advance, and then I also teach, and then I do some freelance writing. Freelance
Hmm.
writing is a little bit harder to do now. There just aren't as many spaces, magazine spaces, to write. But yeah, that's how I do it between teaching and between the money that I get from an advance. I just sort of cobble those things together, and then like things like the San Francisco Writers Conference, like
Hmm.
opportunities that come up where I can teach in other places and give lectures in other places. That's
Yes.
normally the way to go. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, speaking of conferences, are there many opportunities like the San Francisco Writer Conference that they have in New York? And if so, what's the
I
frequency of
wouldn't say
those?
in New York. I would say there's something called the One Story Writers Conference, which is in New York. But otherwise, I think a lot of the really preeminent conferences are outside of New York. A lot of them are on college campuses. There's the
Oh.
Success Summer Workshop. There's the Sewanee Writers Conference. There's
Hmm.
the Bread Loaf Conference. So those ones all seem like the big, uh, the major summer conferences where a lot of writers convene.
That's interesting because like I say that's interesting because you would think looking on the outside looking in that okay I think New York might be the spot. It can speak to the ignorance, at least for myself, thinking that there must be things like that over there, but I'm sure there is, but just because of what happens over there, everybody else is getting a shot to do something too.
Yeah,
No, for
exactly.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, speaking of which, speaking of your book, one of them we had mentioned, I mentioned in the intro that it's you ended up getting a deal, a television deal out of it.
Yeah.
So if I don't know the legalities of speaking of it, if it's not finished yet, but what are you able to say about your book turning into a television show?
Yeah, I mean, I can say that Abby Jacobson from Broad City, who I really admire, I love her work a lot, and she's working on writing a script for it, and that's sort of where we are right now.
Yeah,
I feel like there's that's just kind of she's doing that, and then there's a lot of like waiting around on my end as she does that work, and as she like she's working really hard on it, and then I'm just sort of not involved, and I'll be involved a little bit later once it moves on to the next steps. Yeah.
I see. So how did that come about? Did she contact you, or she picked up your book and said, "I love this book and need to contact Isle"? How does that work out?
Yeah, I have a film agent, and the film agent sent the book to her, and then she liked it, and then a bunch of other people had conversations, film studios, and they eventually decided to make an offer on it. I feel like four people had to come together to make an offer. It's always it's a very it's a very communal in
Yeah, for
Hollywood.
sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh
All the
yeah.
people there to work together. Yeah.
Have you been out? I'm assuming you have, but have you been out to Hollywood? And if so, what was
Yeah, I've
that
been to
like for
LA.
you?
Yeah, yeah. I have only
Oh,
been a few times. Yeah, but yeah,
okay.
it's a I haven't spent a lot of time out there. I can't really speak to it other than I I like hanging out there briefly when I'm there.
No, for sure. I wasn't aware that you even needed a film agent to have, like, if you're an author, like such as yourself, right, and having a book, having a film agent to pitch that book for. I didn't know that was a thing. I
Yeah,
always thought, or from what, just reading in between the lines, obviously, I haven't been in the game as long as you. And I'm also not on the opposite side that you're on. But, just in what you gather, like the nuggets you gather from people, the impression is that, hey, I knew this person knew me, and then they happened to know that I was a writer. So all this magic happened. But the logistics in between seems to be a film agent.
yeah. There's a lot of logistics and a lot of people who are just good at like the contracts and who know who to contact. And like
Yeah.
again, like, I trust my film agent. She's really excellent. So she knows who to send it to, how to fight for a good deal.
No, that's awesome, and I think that's important to know too for anybody who wants to take that path. That there are levels to this.
Right.
There are certainly levels to it, and I also think it helps to be a kind person. Like you're just a genuinely kind person, and I think in that generosity that you exhibit, people just want to work with you. They
Yeah,
just that's why I wanted. I'm like I gotta see if
yeah,
I can get them on this show just to talk at the bare minimum, just to have a conversation because we hit it off really well in San Francisco, and just people. I like being in touch with
yeah,
good people,
yeah,
regardless of what the status is. They don't even have to be anything
yeah.
of quote unquote importance. If you're a good person, I want you in my circle.
Yeah. Exactly. I feel the same way. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll ask you just a couple more questions before I let you go on your way. I know we're a few minutes over, so okay, so let's see. I guess one of the biggest question is advice for the younger generation of writers. What advice for someone who is getting started could you provide for them to say, "Hey, follow this blueprint. It worked for me. You give it a shot, see what happens for you."
Yeah. I mean, I think um, the only advice that I can give is to just really keep writing towards the things that you want to write, and try to keep focusing on your own vision as a writer. Rather than trying to adjust to what the market is trying to do, because I think
Mm,
it's really foolish to write towards the market because the market is changing constantly.
yeah,
Coupled with that is read as much as you can all the time, and try to. It's going to shape your writing. It's I think the best thing for your writing is to just keep reading as often as possible, and that's going to really like just read towards your interests. Again, don't read towards the market. Don't read towards what you think you should be reading. Just keep reading towards like what you're drawn to, because that I think is going to be what's shaped your voice and allows you to become unique as a writer.
that's such great advice because I've heard stuff like that. Like it brings me back to a quote from Stephen King where he says you need to read a lot, read and you need to write a lot, you need to read a lot. But I think there's truth in that. But I think to your point, in the interest of what you are writing in, reading in that niche, could also, oh, sorry about that, could all, oh, must be the alarm. What must also be of significance in order to help shape the person be an even stronger writer. Okay, so okay, one last question.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
Yeah, they can find me on Instagram. My handle is at just _underscore Isle McElroy. They can find me at my website, islemcElroy.com. They can find my books in bookstores, or if you just search my name, you should be able to find both The Atmospherians and People Collide out there in the world. So yeah, those places. And you
Perfect.
can also
Hey,
look, you can find my on my Instagram. You can also find information about the class that I'm teaching and a lot of the classes that I'm teaching at the link in my bio. So
oh, perfect. And make no mistake, I will have that information linked in this episode. Once it's live for everybody to see, and I'll certainly be staying in touch with you.
yeah, yeah. I'm glad we
This
got
is
to. This is wonderful.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thank you so much for just taking this time. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I know that was like technically, like, I might just ask you offline, but
Okay.
hey, well, hey, thank you all so much for taking
Yeah.
the time out of your day to tune into today's episode. Any last words before I let you go?
I don't think so. Just thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming on, and you all take as much time as you need to just, I don't know, recuperate. Go sit in the car by yourself. I don't know. Go find something to do that keeps your mind at ease and at peace. And on that note, you all take care. Have a wonderful remainder of the day, and I'll see you next time.